I never thought our best podcast setup would be in your childhood basement. I like this. We're like looking at each other and feels good.
And the best part is we can stay up late and I don't have to worry about getting in trouble again. Hey, and welcome back to the Whatever is True podcast. I am Bethany. I am one of your hosts along with my husband, Jake.
Hey, everybody.
And as we mentioned in the intro today, we are actually recording in the basement of my childhood home. We are back east right now on a 6-week trip. Our RV is stored in the beautiful state of Washington. And we came back this summer to attend one of our good friends' wedding, to go up to New England and spend time with Jake's side of the family, and then to spend a couple weeks with my side of the family in New Jersey and Virginia.
And I am going to make an amendment to what I said earlier. It's a nice setup, not necessarily the quietest, so you might hear some things in the background on this episode.
Jake also has our puppy snuggled up like right next to his arm. It's really adorable, but it's her bedtime, and we're trying to keep her as quiet as possible, so she fell asleep, which is really good.
Yes, this is the quietest she has been all day, so it's perfect.
Today we're going to actually talk about the election, and there's a couple reasons why, but one of the main reasons is that it just feels like it is absolutely dominating social media right now. Perhaps conversations that you are finding yourself in day to day, and just personal lives, because policies affect people. And that, I don't know, I know Allie B. Stuckey has a thing where she says like policies affect people and people matter, something like that. I'm totally butchering it, but it's a really good sentiment that we agree with.
Yeah, and she might have that copyrighted or something, so we don't want to.
So it's a good thing I didn't say it the right way.
But before we get into all that fun stuff, we are going to mention our sponsor for this week. It is Samaritan Ministries. As the man of the house, a main part of my calling as a Christian is to provide for the needs of my family. And I am so grateful for Samaritan Ministries being there to help me do this. We all know how quickly a medical need can arise. Whether it's a trip to the ER, pregnancy, or an unexpected diagnosis, that is where Samaritan Ministries comes in, connecting hundreds of thousands of Christians across the nation who care for one another spiritually and financially during a time it's needed most. Samaritan Ministries has been the right choice for my family, and I want to share some of the reasons why. 1, there are no networks. You'll have peace of mind knowing that you can go to the doctor you trust, which is especially important when it comes to our holistic mindset. Reason number 2, you're part of a Christian community. When you have a medical need, fellow members send money directly to you to help you pay your medical bills, and you'll do the same for them, all while praying and encouraging one another. And number 3, you can join today. Start healthcare sharing with Samaritan Ministries the day you complete your membership application, which you can do when you visit samaritanministries.org/wavesandlilacs to learn more. That's samaritanministries.org/wavesandlilacs.
So if you guys notice, we have been sharing some of our RV adventures over the last couple episodes. We hope you guys are enjoying it. And we've realized that we kind of have a different story for each state. So today's state is Montana, which we visited in June. And it was so crazy to be there in June because it was still like kind of cool. And it was Hadley's birthday, and she's so used to having a summer birthday basically, and we were all in pants on her birthday and like long sleeves.
It was my perfect summer.
But anyways, that's not actually the story we're sharing today. So I'm gonna let you spearhead this one because this was more you, but I'll come in with my part.
So we're driving to our location in Montana outside Glacier National Park, and we're cruising along at 70 miles an hour on a 2-lane road, which it's normal out there. It's just, double yellow, dashed yellow every once in a while for passing.
And it was relatively empty. Like there were not a lot of cars on the road.
Yeah. But so we're cruising along at like 60, 65 because we have the whole trailer, and we're going, and I'm just cruising along, listening to a book. And all of a sudden, like way ahead, I see a blue car pull out into our lane to pass some people coming the other direction.
Which was another RV or trailer. I think a car behind them. And then this blue sports car was behind them. So like 3 vehicles, but the blue car was coming over to try and pass them into our oncoming lane.
Right. So I don't know if his car didn't shift properly, but he was taking forever and a day to get past these other vehicles. So much so that I'm starting to think we're going to have a head-on collision here. So I slam on my brakes, lay on my horn, and start pulling off to the right-hand side, which had a very small breakdown lane. So I had nowhere to go.
With a bit of a ditch off of that. Like if we had gone down there, we would have been stuck. Well, I think we would have been stuck.
Oh, with the trailer? Absolutely.
So I had been looking down at my phone or something, and all of a sudden I look up and I can see this car, just going right at us. And usually I am the typical person on all of these Instagram reels and everything. I freak out with brake lights in front of us and Jake not braking soon enough and, cars coming into lanes and all of this. And I look up and I just had this complete assurance and complete peace that we were going to be okay. I just knew it. And in that moment, if you could see how close this car was coming to us, you would have thought, they're going to get an accident because it really should have been an accident. But
within feet of a head-on.
I completely believe that God just told me, you guys are going to be okay. So I'm feeling complete peace. But in the meantime, Jake is feeling all the anxiety for both of us.
Absolute heart attack. I was freaking out. I started sweating instantly. And we're driving and Bethany has this piece. And did I pull over?
After the car finally passed?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I needed a break. My heart was pounding out of my chest.
You didn't talk for a while afterwards. You just I think you gripped my hand and you just had all this tension in your body and we just drove in silence for a while because you needed to process what happened. Okay, so what happened though? The car is coming at us. You pull slightly to the right as much as you possibly can.
Yep, and it swerves right in front of us. Like I said, probably within feet of a head-on collision.
It felt like inches. That's how close, because the RV that was coming towards us, I don't think they could see the car or they were not paying attention because they also weren't slowing down or moving over to their right side. And so we're all coming towards each other and then this car narrowly misses all of us. There's no accident, no accident for anyone on the road right there.
Yeah, and all I could think of as this was all happening, I'm laying on my horn, getting over to the side, like I said, and all I could think about was, other than we're about to have a head-on collision, was my horn sounds awful.
It was
That was a great impression. Exactly. So I ordered a train horn and I feel much better with that.
It's very, very loud. Anyone knows when we are around now. Okay. So let's get started with the topic for today. So we're kind of calling this episode, Don't Let the Election Run Your Life. Because as we were talking through what we wanted to discuss in today's episode, we were talking about ballerina farm because she's been like really big in the news lately. And then there was something else we were talking about, but we were like, overall right now, like the election is all consuming. But we didn't want to come into this with like talking about political sides and talking about all of the specific topics. We might do some of that at some point, but right now that's really not what we desire to talk about. We don't want to become a political podcast, but we don't mind, sharing commentaries here and there. Today, we really just want to talk about how your family and the election and the Bible, like, all work together. How can your family approach the election and politics right now with a biblical mindset through a biblical lens?
Yeah, we're not going to go like super political and break down every factor of it, but we are going to talk about how elections have affected us in the past and how we are working through this election cycle.
And we do have very strong political beliefs. I mean, if you go onto either of our Instagram pages, things pop up here and there. We are very conservative in our beliefs, but we also can say that like we see how the Republican Party, it's been shifting more and more lately. And so we don't agree with every single thing that they do or how they do it. But overall, like a lot of their beliefs, their morals, their values, that is where we land. So we do vote Republican. And I'm just going to say that out front here because, again, it's something that we're very vocal about. We're like so happy to talk with people about politics, even if you are from a completely opposing standpoint. I love to hear about people's beliefs and why they believe what they believe and how, like, it aligns with the Bible. So happy to do that. But today we are talking about how to find some sort of balance right now without like losing your mind when everywhere you turn is just people arguing. Like that's what we do not want to facilitate. We don't want to facilitate arguing and people going crazy. We want to encourage civil discussions and conversations with your neighbor that you might disagree with.
Yeah, and it's really hard too because like we're seeing extremes on both sides and like crazy lefties, radical rights, like it is just ridiculous. But if you go to like middle America or just to your neighborhoods, not that many people are that extreme.
But it's the extremes that get all of the attention because they're the loudest. And since it's deemed odd and extreme, they're the ones that get their messages pushed out more, right? Like it's getting interaction. Like if somebody just like says like a mediocre statement, like, Republicans and Democrats both have their flaws. It's a very like mild statement, right? Like we can just all agree on it. But like when you like pull a quote from someone and you turn it into a meme or you like pull out all of these things, like those are the posts that everyone is sharing and saving. And so then like talking like Instagram algorithm here, it's being pushed out more. And like that's what seems to be so prevalent. But is it really prevalent in real life? Or is it just prevalent on social media?
I think it's sadly becoming more prevalent in real life. But I would love to get back to the days where you can have a civil discussion and, put your point of view and listen to someone else's point of view and go, okay, we're still friends, moving on. And now I will say, like, there were some things that were coming out before we kind of got into this mindset of what we're going to be talking about today. But we were not fans of some of the things that Trump was saying. And, it gave us pause and we had to think about, where our vote was going to go.
Well, and I will like add to that and say we're still not sitting here as these Trump fanatics. I know there's a lot of people who are, they think Trump is a savior and like he's going to solve all the problems. And we're not in that boat. I don't want to take Jake's next thing away from him, but I just do want to clarify, like we're not sitting here saying we think that Trump is this righteous, perfect man or anything. We see a very flawed man, but a man who is part of a party that again holds to our belief system.
Right. So we were talking about this over dinner with my brother and his wife out in Wichita when we were visiting them. And we were just kind of having a nice conversation over dinner. And my brother quoted this. I thought it was him at first until I looked it up and found out. Well, I didn't find out who originally said it, but I really liked it. I heard it from my brother.
But we've seen it on social media since then. So who knows who to actually attribute this to.
But it's just pretty much saying, your vote is a chess move, not a Valentine. You're not writing an I love you to a person saying that you're the best person for this job, but you're making a chess move for the future. You're setting up the political climate to be in favor of your beliefs, your political standpoint.
So that is the mindset that we are coming at this conversation today with. And we just want to talk a bit about how we're dealing with the election this year. So back in 2020, I feel like 2020 was such a pivotal year for our country and our world, but it definitely impacted politics on a much deeper level than I had ever experienced in my adult voting life. And I will be the first one to admit that I was sucked into social media's rabbit trails of conspiracy theories and negativity and all of these people's assumptions and like, well, if this is happening, then this is happening. And it was a depressing place to be.
It was one of my favorite things to do at work was argue with my coworkers.
Here I am saying it's depressing and you're my favorite thing.
It was at the time, and I'm looking back at it and going like, oh my goodness, like I could have been sharing the gospel more, or like it took over and it was depressing. Like, I mean, we were going through COVID and everything, and it was just an awful time of politics.
But you're right. Like it did take over. And I think the reason it really took over was two reasons that I'm going to share at least. One, COVID, as you said, everyone's at home. You're on your phone more. And like, this is like your lifeline to the outside world. But also two, I think it came in such a massive wave than it had ever come in before. And like, no one was quite ready for it. I mean, we were just pummeled in 2020 from the beginning with COVID to George Floyd, ending with the election. And then like there was a bunch of stuff that happened in the middle of all of that. And I don't think anyone was prepared. And so like, you had to kind of backtrack and be like, okay, like who is my foundation? Where is my truth found? Where should my time be spent? And like that was when I had to, reassess that. And I don't really know at what point in 2020 that happened. I do know that God really did work in my life and opened my eyes to a lot of things that were happening. But I have taken 2020 as kind of that like baseline and said 2024, this will not happen again. Social media does not own me. Politics do not own me. And I have very willingly just taken a giant step backward. And that's not to say that I don't ever like go down a rabbit trail or like all of a sudden something happens and I'm like, wait, I need to like learn about this. But I feel like I have a much better foundation and like filter for this. And I don't want to be this depressed person again.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we are obviously still informed, but we're not letting it affect our day-to-day life as much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult because like that it is so gotcha, like it drags you in and it pulls you in.
Well, it's like a true reality show,
yeah,
but in a political sense that does ultimately impact your life depending on who goes into office. I mean, it just impacts your life differently. No matter who takes office in January, our lives are going to be impacted one way or the other.
Yeah. And so isn't it great to know that God is ultimately in control in these situations? Romans 13:1 says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authority, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God." So personally, I take great comfort in that, knowing that no matter who is in control, that God is ultimately in control of who's elected, who is in authority. And we were talking, and it includes the bad leaders. Like God will put bad or poor leaders in to discipline countries or the world at different times.
And when he puts in a favorable person, he is blessing a country. And of course, we don't want to be, in a country that feels like it's being judged or, on the negative side of that. But it's just trusting God that there's not a mistake in who ends up in office. Like, as much as we desire a certain candidate to be in charge and we think they would do a better job and like our lives might be better off because of it, at the end of the day, if the person I don't want to be elected is elected, it is part of God's plan. And as a Christian, I can always rest in God's plan. I just have to trust that.
And our human sides might be bummed out, but as long as we remember our God, our mighty, powerful God is in control, then we just need to bring ourselves back to that point to be able to continue life, really just focusing on serving Him.
Well, and I think these conversations can just naturally lead us into talking about end times and prophecy. I know that's something else that I have been seeing more and more conversations surrounding. And how do you handle that? Like, do you find yourself focusing more on like, okay, this looks like this is the beginning of the end times. How does this affect my family? Things like that.
No, honestly, I think when people try to figure out the end times, it more frustrates me than anything because, I mean, it's very clear in 1 Thessalonians 5:2, "For you yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night." Like, this is saying he's going to come back and we're not going to be ready for it. No one knows. Another verse says, no one knows, not even Jesus at the time that he was saying this, knows when the Father is coming back. So when people are like, oh, well, Russia's doing this over here and Israel's been attacked again, or whatever it might be, and they're saying the Lord is coming back at any time, it bothers me, honestly.
Well, and I think you have to take into account that depending on where you fall in your eschatology beliefs, if you are a pre-mill, post-mill, or an a-mill, you're going to be viewing this very differently, which would be a very fascinating episode to talk all about this. We actually spent a bit of time last year, I think it was, going through this and researching a bit of it. So I'm not going to share all of our end times theology quite yet. But I will say that Jake is one of the most laid back, chill people. And he's just, I don't think that you would be ignorant of anything, but you're probably not one of those people who's going to go down a rabbit hole of like, all right, well, Russia did this and I saw this over here and this is here. And then like piecing it together with like Revelation. I mean, I see people do that online
and they're wrong every time.
But I do think that there is, I mean, this goes back to being informed, but not overwhelmed with information. Like, it's okay to be informed with what is happening around the world, but for some people, that's going to be too overwhelming for them to be taking in like parenting and ministry. And then like, oh, okay, we're going to take in half of the world's politics here and how that might maybe possibly be the end times coming soon or something.
It's too much brain space to dedicate to it. Like if that is what you're focused on the entire time, you're missing out on relationships and fun hobbies that you could be doing that aren't stressing you out about the end times.
Would you say that it's wrong then to be like intrigued by it or interested or like looking to see what, how it could pertain to Revelation?
Oh, no. I think it's one of those things where if it takes over or like you dedicate too much time to it. I mean, hey, I'll watch shows about aliens and stuff and go, that's kind of interesting, but it doesn't affect my day-to-day life.
And you're not going alien searching after you watch the documentary?
No, I'm not. Sorry.
Okay. That verse that you were talking about, though, is Matthew 24:36, and it says, "But concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only." And I do also take great comfort in that, and just knowing it's not worth my time to like try to figure out what day, what year this is going to happen, but more to be using this time as we wait for his second coming to be preparing myself for it, to be the best mother, the best wife, to aim to live a godly, pure life. Like that is how I want to be found. And like, I think you may have said it before, like talking to other people about Jesus. Like, let's have more people ready for the second coming of Jesus. Like, that's where my focus really, I would like it to be.
Yeah, let's raise our kids to be wonderful human beings contributing to society and not constantly worrying about, is the Lord coming soon? Just have faith, trust in him, and when he comes, we'll be here and we'll be ready.
All right. So you mentioned worry, and that was another one of the topics I wanted to talk about today was anxiety. I should have like looked up some statistics before this episode today of just like the rising amounts of anxiety, the people being put on meds, and anxiety becoming much more prevalent in even like the younger generation. And it's really sad to be seeing this happen. There is a song that I have found a lot of comfort in this year, just on a like very personal level, as we have dealt with family members and sicknesses and trying to figure out what we're doing with our road trip and our life after the road. But it is by Leanna Crawford, and the song is Psalm 23. She is singing the Psalms, and if you guys want to look it up, it's actually called Still Waters, but it's about Psalm 23.
It is such a beautiful song. And real quick side note, we have been really enjoying people that are singing through the Psalms and just going back to scripture with, the original worship music, really, if you think about it. And this song, Still Waters, is beautiful. Every time it comes on, I just stop and I listen. And
he tries to listen. I'm too busy belting it out for him to really hear her singing.
Oh, I just get to hear your beautiful voice. But I was really excited. We were driving the other day and it came on Christian radio, and I had only heard it on Spotify. So it was really, really nice.
I mean, one of the best verses here is Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything that includes politics. By prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And what if we made those requests just, God, give me that peace during this election season. Give me that wisdom during this election season. Give me the right words to say to the people that have opposing views about the candidates and the choices that we have right now. I just don't think that anxiety has a place. Like, it should not have a place. Is it a normal thing to be struggling with right now when the world and our country just seem like they're about to implode?
Like,
yes, that's normal.
People are literally talking about civil war. Like, people are getting ready for this. And that's very, can make you very, very anxious.
Well, and I think that's a perfect example about knowing when to close your phone and to not encourage these conversations in your life. I know for me personally, I need to take breaks. Like, if you follow me on social media, you will know that there will be some days where I am ready to talk about politics. I am eager to be involved. I try my absolute best to be diplomatic about the topics at hand. But then there will be days or weeks where there's nothing from me. And that is because I need that break, or I don't have anything of substance or of value or that is going to be edifying to the conversation. And I personally need to step back, because if I'm too focused on the possibility of a civil war breaking out while I am a mother in America with a bunch of kids, that's terrifying to me. I mean, I've read history books. I've read about World War II and all of these other things that we have seen in history, and watched. I love to read historical fiction, and I used to read Hannah Kristen or Kristen Hannah. I can never remember which name goes first.
It's one of those. But
there was one book that I read by her, and she's following a mother and her son. And he dies. I don't remember the whole story, but I just remember sitting there bawling my eyes out, and I just could not handle the thought of being in a war and losing my son. And so I had to take a break from her books. But my whole point in this is just that if you're struggling with this anxiety, and if the conversations you're surrounding yourself with, the political posts that you are finding yourself in, pull back. Close your phone, talk about another topic. It's okay. This is about finding that balance and about not being overwhelmed by the things that could possibly happen. There's such a big difference between what could possibly happen and what is actually happening. And I found myself, especially in 2020, on the cusp of all of these things that I thought were about to happen, and they didn't happen. And I learned that when I just stopped with that, my life was at much more peace. And it wasn't me being ignorant or not being aware. It was just, how can I focus on my family and the things that are actually happening that I can deal with, instead of what might happen that I can't do anything about?
Yeah. And like you said, it's a balancing act, because even as we're sitting here talking, I'm like, okay, well, don't get too consumed with it, but stay informed. Don't argue too much, but stand your ground. It's a constant balancing act. You have to know what to say and when to say it, who to say it to, all of that. And the best way to do that is being wise. Being wise with what you're working with, know what you're talking about, have that wisdom that you need, but also have the wisdom of, this person doesn't care what I'm saying. They just want to spit out their bullet points. They want to say what they want to say. Don't interact with that person. You're not going to change some people's minds. You just need to continue on. You need to have that wisdom. What's that famous song? Know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
I think that's before my time.
Probably.
But you're absolutely right. And I have kind of like a rule for myself, because especially if I'm on my stories on Instagram, while I get like a majority of encouragement and support and like-minded people, there are other people that will trickle in. And there's two kinds of people that trickle in that oppose me. There are those that are just simply there to attack me because I don't agree with them. And then there are other people who come into my DMs to have a conversation. They're not yelling at me. They're not attacking me. They want to understand, how can you think this and why do you think this? And so my rule for myself is that if someone's attacking me, I will often just delete and block, because it's not going to be a fruitful conversation. They're not there to learn. They're there just to be mean and hurtful. But somebody who's there with an opposing view and just wants to have a conversation, I'm open for that, and I'm like, we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is always worth your time to have a civil conversation and explain where you are coming from, as long as you're listening to them as well.
Right.
Because they might have a great point that you have never thought of, and it can make you think, and not that it's going to make you completely change your stance, but it might give you a little bit more sympathy for that person or for that point.
Yeah. Like, it helps you understand where they're coming from, because I've had a really hard time with people with opposing views in the past and just not understanding how in the world they could think that. But after having that conversation and I begin to understand, I see where you're coming from and I understand why you think that. I still 100% disagree with you, but there is that like sympathy of, I can see like why your upbringing brought you to this point. And like, there's still that part of me that wants to like rescue them from their beliefs. But, it's just having that conversation with them. And then I really respect that they respect me for having opposing views, because I'm sure that they want me to change my views as much as I want them to change their views. But that doesn't always happen.
And like we said earlier, we don't think that one party is completely correct and the other party is completely wrong. Like, there are flaws on both sides, but we're going to use a chess move to further our side and hopefully get it to be closer and closer to what we feel is biblical and right.
Yeah, I mean, that would be amazing to see that. I don't know if it ever will, come close to that again, like on this side of eternity. But, just moving in that direction. And, if you look back over the years, and you can see what has happened under different presidencies for our country.
And part of me right now is wanting to just like dig into some of the stuff that I've researched, but no, I'm not going to.
All right,
That's not what this episode's for.
And you brought up like knowing what to say, but like using wisdom in that. And so our verse for that was from 1 Kings 4:29. And it says, "And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure, and breadth of mind like the sand on the seashore." And while I recognize that we are not Solomon, the New Testament does say that God gives wisdom to those who ask, and wisdom can and absolutely should be applied to this situation of politics, and having wisdom of knowing when to say something and knowing when not to say something and knowing what to say and what not to say.
Yeah, I really like this verse because so many people, like Christian or non-Christian, accept the fact that Solomon was the wisest man. And this verse clearly says God gave him that wisdom. So, and it, like Bethany said, it also says, ask and he will give you wisdom abundantly. So, like, that is the one thing we are going to encourage whoever is listening. Pray, ask for the wisdom that God gives. He will give it to you abundantly. And, go through the different things, think and pray, and just, bring it before the Lord. Because if you're bringing it before the Lord and he is giving you the peace and leading you in this direction, that is something that you can take to the bank. You can be assured of in this life.
I guess the final point we could share here is just what all of this looks like for our actual family. Like, do we have any specific times that we won't talk about politics, or what that looks like when we're around our kids who are 9 and under at the moment?
And our kids are great because Emmett, our oldest, will be like, oh no, not Biden. We want Trump. Like, he doesn't know most of this stuff, but he just wants to be on our team and like cheer on the more conservative side. And it's so sweet to see.
We don't involve them very much in politics. Like, we want to preserve their innocence, and most political topics are very mature themes. Occasionally, abortion will come up to some degree. We try to be very careful how we talk about it, but also, it's something that Jake and I are very passionate about. The kids have joined us in a pro-life walk in the past, and it's such a hard concept to explain to kids that there's some parents who don't want their kids. And so we try to be gentle about the topic, but also, because it comes up, let them know that this is a problem. This is an issue. So we will talk about politics in front of them, but we'll just be careful, like, how we're talking about them. And then we also don't want it to be consuming the conversations that are happening in our homes. So we might save something for later, or like if we know something happened on the news, like the day that Trump was shot, like that was something that we were trying to actively watch in real time to understand what was happening. But like after the kids went to bed that night, if I remember correctly, we were watching some stuff online.
Yeah, that was a download night. We just got as much information as possible. But like when we are talking about sensitive conversations like abortion, what's great is we just teach our kids that, like, we tell them what abortion is. They know that, but we don't go into the nitty gritty, because all they need to know is that this is a life from the moment of conception that someone is deciding not to get rid of. Not all the nitty gritty that people get into, like, oh, well, what if it's a rape case? What if it's before 6 weeks? So there's just easy ways of having a conversation and explaining what's happening without going into the nitty gritty.
Well, and it's also important to note that I actually wrote a Bible curriculum for young kids, preschool through 2nd grade, all on the topic of life and how God values and sees life. So my kids have gone through this curriculum with me. It does not explicitly talk about abortion. Like, it is really just giving children the foundation of valuing life from the beginning, from conception until the end of life, and how God values life even inside of the womb. So like, our kids understand that life is valued by mom and dad, but more importantly by God. And so this is something I need to value. So they already have this foundational base here of understanding, what is biblical.
Link will be in the show notes. Every time we do this, I just really enjoy podcasting with you more and more. And like, I really liked this one, and I hope you, the audience, really liked it too, because this was just more of a conversation between Bethany and I. We were trying not to do so many like bullet points and talk at you. We just wanted to kind of have you guys along for a conversation that we had. So hopefully we were an encouragement.
Hopefully you remember to have some coffee during this. We should have encouraged that from the beginning.
But hopefully this was encouraging and uplifting in a time that there's not a ton of encouragement and uplifting. So thank you for joining us. As always, you can find our podcast over on Instagram at Whatever Is True Co.
I am Bethany over at Waves and Lilacs.
And I am Jake off script.
See you guys next time.